Sit down, gentlemen. Mr. Queen, I suppose you're wondering why I asked you to come?
Yes, sir. An urgent summons from such a distinguished government official as yourself, sir. I can't imagine why I should be so honored.
Sir, I hope you don't mind my coming along with my son. I was, well, a little bit nervous.
Oh, I quite understand, Inspector Queen. Glad you came, Mr. Queen. I've summoned you to Washington to lay a very important case before you. The most important case you'll ever be called upon to investigate.
I'm completely at your service.
On a certain date recently, a certain armed vessel of the United States was waylaid by a swarm of enemy submarines on the high seas. At exactly 5 p.m., 3 torpedoes crashed into our ship, and it sank almost immediately. The loss of American lives was considerable.
I'm sorry to learn that, sir.
This ship was involved in an extremely important operation, gentlemen. Its loss through surprise submarine attack not only caused the deaths of a large number of American fighting men, but a war plan closely integrated with the overall Allied strategy was licked before it got started.
But the plan must have been a strict War Department secret.
It was even stricter than usual, Mr. Queen. Only 6 people knew of it, and their integrity cannot possibly be questioned. Yet the nest of enemy subs was lying in wait.
Mightn't they be, there by pure accident, sir?
No, Inspector. In the naval action which followed the attack, one of the enemy subs was captured by our forces. The enemy commander has been thoroughly interrogated, his effects examined. There's no doubt that those subs had positive information.
But if total secrecy was maintained, sir, how did the enemy get its information?
That, Mr. Queen, is why you're in Washington today. In the first place, the investigative agencies of the government are short-handed. We can use all the expert help we can get.
And I suppose my son's reputation for solving tough problems qualifies for him, sir?
Very much so, Inspector. But there's still another reason I called you, Mr. Queen.
What's that, sir?
You're involved.
I beg your pardon, sir?
My son's involved in the sinking of one of our ships by the enemy. I don't get it, sir.
Neither do we, Inspector. We haven't had time to work on it. The clue reached Washington only this morning. This scrap of paper, Mr. Queen, was found on the captured enemy sub-commander.
Oh, thank you, sir. But this is fantastic.
But for Pete's sake, son, what's on that paper?
Just 2 words, Dad. Or rather, a word and an initial. Ellery Q.
Ellery Q. But how in time did your name get on a memo of the possession of an enemy sub-commander, son?
I'd certainly like to find it out.
I take it then, Mr. Queen, you'd welcome the opportunity to investigate this case?
Try me, sir.
Very well. Effective immediately, consider yourself a special investigator for the United States government.
Thank you, sir. To whom am I to report?
You're accountable directly to me. Inspector, it's been a pleasure. Mr. Queen, good luck.
Thank you, sir. I'll find out how many those enemy subs knew about that ship. If I never solve another case in my life.
Do you suppose the inspector and Sergeant Velli will get a leave of absence from the police department, Ellery?
I've deputized them as assistant special investigators, haven't I, Nikki? They won't have any trouble. But where are they, blasted? I can't do a thing until I get those lists.
What list, Ellery?
Dad? Velli? Did you get it?
Here it is, son.
Just came by a special courier from the War Department, Ellery.
A lot of papers. Don't tell me we have to go through a batch of stuffy reports.
They ain't stuffy reports, Miss Porter.
Then what are they?
A list of the names and the home addresses of the survivors, the missing and the dead of that torpedoed American ship. God bless their souls.
All right, Dad. Now we can get to work. We've got to question the families of every man on this list.
Yes, son.
But, Maestro, there are thousands of names here. They stretch all the way from Maine and Florida to Oregon and California.
There's no other way, Sergeant. Nikki?
Yes, Ellery.
Your job is to take these lists and arrange them by states and cities. Dad, you and Velli work out a practical traveling schedule for the 4 of us. We'll cover the entire country working west.
But Ellery, what do you expect to find by questioning the families of the victims?
Clues, Nikki. Clues that will tell us how the enemy knew about our warship and where to lie in wait for it. Somewhere in these names and addresses are our suspects and the solution.
And maybe the answer to that Ellery Q on that piece of Axis paper. That one gets me.
Ah, never mind that now, Sergeant. Let's get to work.
Mrs. Mary Jane Brown, it's this house, all right?
Mrs. Brown, widow, one son, Richmond, Virginia.
We sure are covering territory. How many visits does this make?
541, Sergeant.
And we're still on the eastern seaboard.
I hope we have some luck with this Mrs. Brown, Ellery. I can't see that we're getting anywhere at all. Not a clue so far.
I told you it'd be a big job, Dad. Well, Sergeant, rouse Mrs. Brown. Mother of Harry Brown, seaman, 3rd class, U.S. Navy. Mrs. Brown?
I'm Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown, we're special investigators from Washington.
Government people, come in. Ain't nothing wrong with my son, Harry.
No, Mrs. Brown, your son's getting along fine in the hospital.
Thank goodness. Give me a start. My parlor is a little messy. Won't y'all sit?
Your son, Harry, he was wounded in a recent naval engagement, Mrs. Brown. He was quite a hero.
I know, sir. He's a real American. So we're just here to talk to a hero's mother. Harry's a wonderful boy, sir. Enlisted right off into the war. Proud? Why, sir, he thinks he's being an American sailor is the finest thing out there is.
Ain't nothing finer, Mrs. Brown.
Why, my Harry's so proud of the Manila Bay. That's his ship. He says it's the best ship of the Navy. That's what all the boys say, Mrs. Brown. Well, sir, it's the fact that I got into the argument with Mr. Williams a couple weeks before Christmas.
Who is Mr. Williams, Mrs. Brown?
Yankee storekeeper. He keeps the grocery and meat market half-mile into town. He's got a boy in the Navy, too. And he says his son's ship, the Buffalo, is the finest in the Navy. Is that so? I says. My Harry's ship, the Manila Bay, is. Almost came to throwing things. There was a crowd around the center laughing their heads off. That old fool Williams was so mad.
Mrs. Brown, did you ever hear your son Harry mention the name Ellery Queen or Ellery Q?
Beg your pardon, ma'am? I don't think so.
We didn't take up any more Mrs. Brown's time, Nikki.
But Ellery...
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Dad, Sergeant.
But, sir, I can tell y'all lots more about my Harry.
Yeah, I'm sure you could, Mrs. Brown.
Tell Harry his mom's praying he'll get better quick. I don't blame you for cutting that one short, son.
Another washout.
Hasn't heard of Ellery Queen. We'll never solve the mystery of Ellery Q.
Nevertheless, gentlemen and Miss Porter, Mrs. Brown has given us our first clue in 541 visits. Nikki, you took notes?
Yes, Ellery, of everything she said, but...
But what clue, Maestro?
Didn't just spot it, Sergeant. It's not an important clue. It doesn't tell us much, but it encourages me to keep going. We're on the right track. Dad, who's next on our list?
Somebody in Lexington, Kentucky. Clue number 1, huh? Too much for me.
Let's hurry, or we'll miss our train connection. Who knows? We may find clue number 2 in the state of Kentucky.
Nikki, how do we stand now?
No luck in Kentucky, Inspector, or in Ohio, or in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. Number of states covered, 20. People visited, way over 1,000. So we find ourselves in Minneapolis, Minnesota, about to question the father of Lieutenant Thomas L. Jones, U.S. Army. Deceased.
Not even killed in action. Drowned on my ship, the sub sank.
If you ask me, it's hopeless. 1,265 visits and 1 clue. In Richmond, Virginia, he says... Here's the Reverend.
Mr. Queen, forgive me for having kept you waiting, but my duty is in the church.
That's quite all right, Reverend Jones. You know why we're here?
My sextons told me. Won't you all sit down? It's about my son and how he died in the service of his country.
Drowned without a rat's chance.
I'm a father myself, Reverend.
We know how you feel.
Thank you. We were very, very close, Tom and I. He was so full of life, and I'm afraid sometimes might perish. Though Tommy was a bit too full of life. God bless him.
He wrote to you frequently, Reverend?
Oh yes, Mr. Queen. Every day my wife is bedridden. You know, Tom knew how anxious his mother was about his daily welfare, how much his letters meant to us. As a matter of fact, I happen to keep the very last letter he ever wrote to us, dated Christmas Eve, if you wouldn't be bored.
I assure you, Reverend, we're very much interested in Lieutenant Jones's last letter to his parents.
That's kind of you, Miss Queen. For example, listen to this. It's a part of the letter I've repeated to many friends and parishioners. You sure I'm not boring you?
Quite sure, Reverend Jones.
You especially will appreciate this, Dad. Just today, one of the boys brought out an autographed photo of Dorothy Lammer, and Shavetail Billy Green that he swiped it from him, and the other contestant, one of my special buddies in the company, Frank Winters. Frank said he had, and they almost had a brawl about it. So I finally said, you both claim it. Why not put it up to the old Grouchy, our CO? They said, okay, and I got a hard time keeping a straight face because our CO is full of surprises. Well, the old Grouch heard the case. Without batting an eye, he says, gentlemen, you each claim possession of the autographed photo of this young woman, he says, and since there is no other facts, I'll decide the case with absolute justice. To wit, I'll tear the photo in half, like this, and he rips poor Lammer right down the middle, and give each of one of you half. Now, scram, the CEO snarls, and I start thinking just about the war, and you'll find yourselves with a couple of desk jobs, while the rest of us are having fun. You should have seen Frank's and Billy's faces. Dad.
Dad, Philly, Nikki, let's go.
Oh, but really, I'm sorry. It all came back. If you'll give me just a moment, please.
Thank you, Reverend Jones. We shan't intrude any further.
That was such a sad letter. Ellery, you didn't even give me a chance to ask about the Ellery Q. You never do.
Never mind Ellery Q now, Nikki. Dad, we're in luck.
What luck?
Yeah, so we meet Reverend Jones in Minneapolis, so he read us Lieutenant Jones' last letter. What do we got? The usual nothing.
On the contrary, Sergeant, we've got clue number 2.
Now wait a minute, son. You mean to say that somehow the enemy got hold of that boy's yarn to say to his father about Dorothy Lammer's photograph?
I mean, just that.
But suppose they did, Maestro, so what?
Never mind now, Sergeant. Dad, we're really beginning to get somewhere. Nikki, who's next on our list?
Somebody in Laramie, Wyoming.
Westward ho!
Wait in the shellfish, Mr. Queen. I'll get her off the assembly line. So, how do we stand, Miss Porter?
We're scraping the bottom of the barrel, Sergeant.
East, south, middle, west, far west, Oregon, Washington, now Los Angeles, California, and what do we got? Sore pups.
And 2 clues I don't understand.
Are you sure you weren't dreaming of clues in Richmond and Minneapolis, Ellery?
No, Nikki, they were clear as crystal, but there must be another clue somewhere. Perhaps more than one.
Who is this we're investigating in this airplane factory?
Mrs. Richard K. Smith of Los Angeles. She works here. Why, she's no longer than I am. In overalls.
Who's Mr. Queen?
I am Mrs. Smith, special investigator for
Yeah, I know. The foreman told me. I don't know what I can tell you. My husband's dead. Died on a ship. So I got myself this job helping to make planes.
It's courageous of you, Mrs. Smith.
Courageous? Hooey. I wish they'd let me shoot a machine gun. Make it snappy, please. Every minute I'm away from my bench means I'm holding up a plane.
Your husband was Private Richard K. Smith?
Yeah, a draftee. We met while he was in camp near San Francisco. We fell for each other. Why do I have to go over all this? I want to get back to my work.
I assure you it's necessary, Mrs. Smith.
I know how you feel, Mrs. Smith.
Dick didn't get leave more than once in a blue moon, and I couldn't afford to make the trip up to Frisco to visit him. It was tough. Then, all of a sudden, Dick shows up in L.A., December 24th. Unexpected one-day leave, he says. I bawled like a fool. Dick said there was a rumor in camp they were shoving off, and that's why the boys got leave.
Do you want my handkerchief, Mrs. Smith?
Thanks. I had a feeling in my bones I'd never see my Dick again, so I said, Dick, let's get married. Now. Right away. He kissed me. But then he said we ain't got no time. He's supposed to report back to camp at Frisco, and he had just had time to make it.
But you did manage it, didn't you, Mrs. Smith?
You must have, since you're a missus.
Yeah, it was like a miracle. The last minute Dick gets a phone call from some officer in his camp, saying he was not to report back to camp, but to somewhere else.
Yes, where was he to report, Mrs. Smith?
I don't know. All I know is the switch in my plan gave Dick 7 hours extra leave. So we got a lot of our friends together and told them all about it, and we got married, and then it went away. I never even got a letter from him.
We're terribly sorry, Mrs. Smith.
What am I crying for? I got a date with the bomber, and I hope it gets the dirty rat that got my husband. I gotta get back.
I don't like this job, Ellery. I want to go home.
We can't go home, Nikki, not till we finish this list of survivors and casualties that happened on the torpedo ship.
Who's next, Inspector?
Never mind that list. We're through with it.
Through with it!
Yes, we just found the third and most important clue. We don't need any more.
You don't need any more, but Ellery, that means...
Yes, Dad. Now I know how the enemy found out when we're to ambush that American ship.
But how about the Ellery Q, Ellery? That scrap of paper with your name on it was found on the enemy's commander.
You know what that means too, son?
Oh, I knew the answer to that, Dad, a long time ago. Let's go back to Washington and report a successful solution.
And so Ellery Queen now knows the answer to the mystery of the murdered ship. Do you? You should be able to answer the 3 questions correctly. What were the 3 clues Ellery spotted? What did they mean to the enemy? What did Ellery Q mean? And now, the solution. So, you also solved the mystery of that Ellery Q on the enemy sub-commander's scrap of paper, Mr. Queen?
That wasn't my name. It isn't a name at all. The appearance was a coincidence. It's a code. Let's take the Q part first. Which letter of the alphabet is Q?
Let me see. A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
The 17th letter, Ellery.
Remember that, especially you, Sergeant. Now, one of our facts was that the ship was torpedoed at 5 p.m. In one international system of figuring time, a.m. and p.m. are not used. The hours are numbered from 1 to 24. By this system, the letter Q in the code phrase Ellery Q would stand for the 17th hour. What is the 17th hour in terms of a.m. and p.m.?
5 p.m., the time of the torpedoing.
So we know Q is the time and instruction given to the commander of the enemy submarine.
But what does the Ellery stand for?
Obviously, Nikki, for a word which, when grouped with Q or 5 p.m., gives a clear message. Think of it as a group of letters, E-L-L-E-R-Y. Now note that the first and fourth letters are the same, and the second and third. Can you think of another word with similar instructions?
Who, me, Maestro?
Oh, well, Sergeant. What happened at 5 p.m.? There was an attack on the ship. Attack. A-T-T-A-C-K.
Ellery, the code word for attack.
Yes, Dad. Ellery Q simply meant to the sub-commander attack at 5 p.m., which, combined with his other information, gave him all he had to know.
Exactly what the FBI figured out, Mr. Queen, the day after you took this assignment. But how did the enemy know about the ship? That it was sailing, when, from where, and all about it?
I found 3 clues, sir. That told me the whole tragic story. Dad, what did Mrs. Brown of Richmond, Virginia tell us?
Why, Mrs. Brown said her son claimed his ship, the Manila Bay, was a violinist in the Navy.
Clue number 1, the name of the ship, the Manila Bay. ships in the United States are named by a system. One type of American warship is named after famous American battles. Manila Bay was a famous American battle of the Spanish-American War. What type of ship is named after famous battles?
Aircraft carriers.
An enemy agent overheard Mrs. Brown's thoughtless remark that morning 2 weeks before Christmas in a crowded store. When the enemy's intelligence headquarters of the United States fitted a Manila Bay into its other information, it was able to say an aircraft carrier never sails alone. It is always accompanied by fighting craft to protect it. Therefore, a large naval force is involved.
But Ellery, I still don't see.
But what little of information did Reverend Jones of Minneapolis unconsciously reveal?
That joke about the argument in camp over Dorothy Lamer's photo and how the CO settled it.
That yarn came from Lieutenant Jones's last letter, written, therefore, just before it was shipped out of camp. Reverend Jones's son knew he might never come back, so on the eve of departure, he tried to give his father an important piece of information by inventing a bit of apparently innocent camping gossip. Can we figure out what Tom was trying to say? Oh yes. Consider that the letter was written by a minister of the gospel on Christmas Eve. Consider that it was the story of two people claiming the same cherished object and a wise arbiter who said, cut it in half.
Tom was writing a parallel to the Bible story of the wise king who ordered an infant cut in half when two women claimed it.
And who was that wise king? King Solomon.
The Solomon Islands.
Tom was trying to tell his father he was being shipped off to the Solomons.
Precisely. Reverend Jones thoughtlessly repeated it to his friends and parishioners.
And eventually it reached a spy's ears or some Axis sympathizer, and was sent along to enemy HQ to be added to the other bits of information about the Manila Bay and its accompanying naval force. And the third clue, Mr. Queen?
And Nikki, what did Mrs. Smith say?
Well, that there was a rumor Dick Smith's outfit was going overseas. The day before Christmas when he was on unexpected leave. At the last minute, he got an extra 7 hours leave.
Or put it this way, Private Dick Smith, on unexpected leave in Los Angeles, was supposed to return to his camp near San Francisco. This trip normally takes 10 hours, but because Smith was notified at the last minute to report to a different place, he found himself with 7 hours extra leave. In other words, his outfit had suddenly been moved from a place 10 hours travel from Los Angeles to a place only 3 hours travel from Los Angeles. What important troop embarkation point is 3 hours travel from Los Angeles?
San Diego.
And everybody at the Smiths' last-minute wedding was told about it by Mrs. Smith.
Yes, sir. And when the enemy put all the bits and places together, along with the other information that clearly tied them into a single operation, he knew, first, that a large naval force of fighting ships was involved. Second, his naval force was found for the Solomons. And not only that, but troops were involved because Tom Jones was an Army officer and Private Smith was a draftee. And this meant the fighting ships were convoying troop transports. And to warrant such a large naval escort, it must involve a great number of transports. So it was an important troop movement. Third, the convoy was sailing from San Diego, California, when Lieutenant Jones wrote on Christmas Eve Private Smith got his unexpected leave the same day, December 24th, so the time of the sailing was the next day, Christmas Day. The enemy related to its subs operating in the South Pacific these facts, and they merely lay in wait along the easily estimated route until the convoy appeared. A simple nautical calculation. There it is, sir, the whole picture, from 3 little bits of loose talk. In other words, loose lips sink ships.